B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Thursday, January 26, 2017. Tomorrow, I'm going to deliver the News and Comment podcast to my usual podcast audience, the way you're listening right now. And I'm also going to stream it live on Facebook. So we'll have a live video feed starting at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And I encourage you to log on to Facebook. Go ahead and make a friend request if we're not already friends on Facebook. And then you'll get an alert when I go live and feed the podcast via video. And you'll get to see what I look like, the climate here at the secret studio. Maybe we'll even bring Chloe in for a cameo. But I want to test out Facebook Live. I've been intrigued by the way other people have used it, and I think it's a way we might be able to branch out and reach new listeners. So you can help by not only watching the feed, but also while it's running, share it to your network of contacts on Facebook, and that will help me reach the friends of my friends. Looking forward to it. We'll see how it all pans out. Some interesting news today that while many Democrats skipped the Trump inauguration last week and stayed in their districts, one, Democrat Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, traveled to Syria, where she spent time talking to average people in different parts of the country, and she also ended up in a meeting with Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria. And she told CNN, initially, I hadn't planned on meeting him. When the opportunity arose, I did so because I felt it's important that if we profess to truly care about the Syrian people, about their suffering, then we've got to be able to meet with anyone that we need to if there's a possibility that we could achieve peace. And that's exactly what we talked about. Now, one of the takeaways that Tulsi Gabbard has shared with Americans is that there is no moderate opposition in Syria. That is a myth. And I've been challenging that myth for a long time. It was badly and baldly promoted by Barack Obama and his minions, and it really has never made sense. And when you look at the landscape there, the array of fighters trying to take down the Assad government, most of them are brutal extremists with funding, sponsorship from Saudi Arabia, from the Emirates, and from other wealthy interest groups around the world. The Turks have helped these fighters in Syria, and we can presume that Israel may have also covertly provided support. We have anecdotes, frequent anecdotes, that Israeli soldiers help wounded fighters from Syria and then return them to the battlefield. So there's a lot going on in Syria that the American media has not bothered to share with us. It's a complicated picture. There are many moving parts, many of these different militia groups. But fundamentally, Tulsi Gabbard has said that there is no difference between, quote, moderate rebels and al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, or the Islamic State. They are all the same. Although opposed to the Assad government, the political opposition leaders adamantly rejected violence as a way to bring about reforms. That's the political opposition. So the military fighters are outsiders, almost exclusively. And this is a murky picture that is still unclear. And I'll note that we're still waiting for President Trump to either activate or disclose his secret plan to demolish the Islamic State. He campaigned on that. He's been asked about it and just punted the question away a couple of times. But remember, he said he's got a plan, but it's secret. And his defense secretary is on the job, was one of the first people confirmed. And so we should expect the Trump secret plan to be not so secret and to be rolled out sometime soon, right? Well, we'll see. And if Trump was planning to use diplomacy to try to defuse the very volatile situation in Syria, well, the top senior management team at the State Department has resigned. Now, it's not clear if they did so individually or if this was kind of a group decision. One of the key people, a guy named Patrick Kennedy, he surfaced in the Hillary Clinton email investigation, and he is the, Assistant Secretary of State, the number 2 guy Undersecretary for Management. That's his actual title. And he was expecting to stay on. But on Wednesday afternoon yesterday, Kennedy and 3 of his top officials resigned unexpectedly. And this is in addition to other key personnel, 3 of them, people you've never heard about, who also decided to resign yesterday. And according to Josh Rogan at the Washington Post, this amounts to a near-complete house cleaning of all senior officials that deal with managing the State Department, its overseas posts, and its people. And a guy who served John Kerry, David Wade, State Department Chief of Staff, said it's the single biggest simultaneous departure of institutional memory that anyone can remember. Well, that's because they got rid of the old institutional memory. Anyway, it's hard to know if this is just part of the ordinary transition process or not. So I dropped a quick email to my friend Peter Van Buren, who got bounced from the State Department by Hillary Clinton because he wrote a book about his experiences squandering American money rebuilding Iraq. And Van Buren, I just asked him for a brief comment, and he complied. He said, "This looks to me like Clinton people being allowed to move internally or retire in lieu of being fired." He said it's not clearly resignations of conscience. But if you were a career diplomat and the head of ExxonMobil was named Secretary of State, a guy with a lousy human rights record, and Donald Trump is your commander-in-chief, would you grab your retirement ticket and say, "Get me out of here"? Well, I might. The president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, was scheduled to come to Washington next week and meet with the Donald. And after Trump's very belligerent announcement yesterday that he's going to build the wall and Mexico is going to pay for it, Peña Nieto, via Twitter, basically announced that he's not coming. The decision to cancel the meeting was the result of a remarkable back-and-forth exchange between the 2 sparring leaders, much of it on Twitter. So Peña Nieto, of course, did it in Spanish. Esta mañana hemos informado. We told the White House we're not coming. And then Trump tweeted back, warning that he might cancel the meeting himself if Mexico didn't agree to pay for the wall. And in a partial tweet that went out at before 6 a.m. today, he said, if Mexico's unwilling to pay for the badly needed wall, then it would be better to cancel the upcoming meeting. And Trump then announced this afternoon, we have agreed to cancel our planned meeting. Unless Mexico is going to treat the U.S. fairly with respect, such a meeting would be fruitless, and I want to go a different route. We have no choice. Now, listen to this bullshit. It is the United States that is trying to treat Mexico unfairly. Mexico is rejecting that. It's the United States that is disrespecting our sovereign neighbor. And his demands in advance, without any talks with the Mexicans that they must pay for our wall, are just ridiculous. And so, yes, a meeting would be fruitless, and I'm not sure why they bothered to set it up in the first place. And you've got to understand that Peña Nieto faces a lot of opposition in his own country. And the idea that we feel the need to secure our border at their expense is just so irrational and incoherent. And yet it plays to the Trump idiots. Yeah, man, we're going to build a wall. Mexico's going to pay for it. So today, in retaliation for this scuttled meeting, Trump at the Republican congressional retreat in Philadelphia, announced that he is asking Congress for a 20% tax on all imports from Mexico, raising billions of dollars that would cover the cost of his wall. The 20% annual tax would raise about $10 billion a year. Now, that assumes that the tariff would not reduce imports and that Mexico would not choose to export elsewhere where they could get a better deal. And so Trump, this guy who is self-promoted as the world's greatest deal maker, The Art of the Deal is his best-selling book. He's negotiating with himself in public. Now, I thought he might try an even more underhanded approach, like trying to tax the remittances that Mexican nationals earn in the United States and send home to their families. That would be very complicated and messy and discriminatory. This is discriminatory. It's not part of an overall American plan to realign our import and export tariffs and other policies. This is purely payback. And it just shows how far out of touch Donald Trump truly is. And he's got millions of people in this country who are ready to follow him over a cliff or even over that wall. Meanwhile, mostly Democratic mayors from coast to coast are standing up and saying that we will not be bullied, we will remain sanctuary cities, and we're not going to let Donald Trump threaten to cut off financial aid to our cities in retaliation for failing to, respond to the demands of Trump. And if you don't know what a sanctuary city is, I'll give you this example. There's a man in San Francisco who called the police because his car had been stolen. And as a result, they ran a check on him, discovered that he was an undocumented non-citizen. There were no warrants. He had no criminal record of any kind. But as he attempted to retrieve his stolen car, he was instead fed to ICE and locked up for months. And they're still struggling to sort out those issues. The bottom line is local police departments don't enforce the tax laws. They don't enforce other federal laws. And to demand that they enforce the immigration laws is not only inappropriate legally, but it is just bad judgment. You wind up with a whole group of people who are underground in the shadows, unwilling to contact law enforcement. And this is counterproductive. So there's also, unfortunately, for Trump, a 2012 Supreme Court decision that said that Congress is not permitted to set conditions on spending to coerce states or localities to participate in a federal program against their will. Any conditions, at a minimum, must be directly related to the punitive action. So that means that the feds, for example, couldn't cut off transportation funding to San Francisco or California in retaliation for immigration issues like sanctuary cities. And there are some people who are tiptoeing around this. Sam Liccardo is a moderate mayor of San Jose, and he doesn't like to use the word sanctuary. But he said, our police department, like most, doesn't engage in enforcement of federal tax laws, federal environmental laws, or federal immigration laws. Boston's mayor, Martin Walsh, went even further. He said, to anyone who feels threatened today or vulnerable, you are safe in Boston. We will do everything lawful in our power to protect you. And if necessary, we will use City Hall itself to shelter and protect anyone who's targeted unjustly. Now, this is reminiscent of the Roman Catholic Church designating its religious properties as sanctuaries. That's pretty interesting, and we're going to watch this very carefully. Trump gave an interview to ABC News and anchor David Muir. And before I get into it, I have to tell you that Trump is so arrogant and resists the advice of people who have had to tell him, Donald, don't say that you support torture, okay? Use the euphemism enhanced interrogation techniques because torture is illegal. And if you call waterboarding torture and say you support it, then you are advocating breaking American laws. But he figures he's above all that. And I think that this is a set of comments that could really come back to bite him. So when asked if he thought a torture technique like waterboarding works, he answered in the affirmative. He said his opinion was formed after he spoke to unnamed people at the highest level of intelligence. And when asked if methods like that are effective, the answer, quote, was yes, absolutely. And he continued, quote, "When ISIS is doing things that nobody's ever heard of since medieval times, would I feel strongly about waterboarding? As far as I'm concerned, we have to fight fire with fire." Now, despite that, Trump said that he would listen to the views of his Defense Secretary, James Mattis, who is opposed to torture, and Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, who appears to be caught in a squeeze play here. And he said about them, if they don't want to do it, that's fine. Does that mean he'll get other people to do it? That part is not clear. So this is a very troubling development. Again, Trump is operating in a way that I think puts himself at legal risk. And this once again underscores that Barack Obama's intentional refusal to investigate and prosecute torture and war crimes of the previous administration has set a precedent that enables Donald Trump to blithely move forward and say, oh, yeah, we're going back to the good old days of 2002. We're going to grab some bad dudes and poke them in the ass and pretend to drown them. I mean, it is truly mind-boggling to see this playing out. Gail Collins, in an op-ed in today's New York Times, makes some good points about Mike Pence, the vice president, and his role in the Trump administration. Sometimes he's out there trying to explain what he thinks Donald meant to say, but he's got a far-right radical agenda. And Collins notes this is a guy who, as a member of Congress, co-sponsored a bill that would also allow hospitals to deny abortions to pregnant women who would die without the procedure. His war against Planned Parenthood when he was governor of Indiana led to the closing of 5 clinics. None of them did abortions. They did, however, provide testing for STDs, and one of the counties where a clinic closed suffered a huge HIV outbreak. Pence, since I blew his name there, let me just share with you that this morning I was listening to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now!, and she was trying to say Trump, but the name Bush came out of her mouth. Amy, I understand. So Pence voted against the Lilly Ledbetter Act for equal pay for women. He argued that having 2 working parents would lead to a stunted emotional growth in children. He said same-sex couples were a sign of societal collapse. And Republicans in Congress are working hard to defund Planned Parenthood. And back during the campaign, Trump kind of separated abortion from Planned Parenthood, but they've schooled him now that that doesn't play with the Republican base. Adam Schiff is the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. He buys into the whole scam that Russia hacked the computers and diverted that information to WikiLeaks, and that's what flipped the election to Trump. And Adam Schiff is insisting that we need a 9/11-style commission, a bipartisan independent group, not current members of Congress, to investigate this. Now, this is the guaranteed way to make sure we never get the truth. The 9/11 Commission was a joke. I went to Washington and observed their proceedings. I read their report. And when you compare it to the evidence that is publicly available, the whitewash is quite evident. So that's what Adam Schiff, I think, is calling for. And as you know, when I look at this picture and say, gosh, the Democrats believe that Russia manipulated our election, and all they want is an investigation. They don't want a new election. They don't want to demand, that Trump be impeached for this chicanery. And it's interesting to note, this morning I got an email from Bold Pack. They've been hounding me for 6 months now. I don't know how they got my email, but they are a Democratic dark money super PAC, and they write these really howler emails. Sign your name. Demand a new presidential special election. And then they play out the false claims of voter fraud that Trump has repeated in recent days and say that he's a hypocrite, and if he really thinks the election was unfair, then we think there should be another election. Now, this might have made sense 3 months ago or even 6 weeks ago. But to raise this now, We don't have a mechanism for that. And we don't have a Congress that could change the law or make a new law or vacate the election certification. It's too late for that. But it's not too late to impeach the bastard. So my friend Norman Solomon and others have created the website impeachdonaldtrumpnow.org. I'll link to it in the show file for this podcast, and if you're so inclined, you can add your signature on that petition. Every day I like to pause and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins podcast with your subscriptions. And today, you know who you are. I thank those who regularly contribute or who have annual subscriptions. And if you'd like to become a new subscriber, it's easy. Just come over to peterbcollins.com, click on the menu button, then become a subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and you can choose $5, $10, $20 a month, or $50 annual subscription. There's also the Peter B. Collins iPhone and iPad app that's available for $2.99 at the Apple App Store. So there are many ways that you can support me, and I hope you choose to do so. One of the things I wanted to ask about today on a personal note is that today is the 35th anniversary of the launch of KRQR, the rocker, here in San Francisco, a station where I was the morning host through most of the 1980s. And it caused me to think, I wonder how many people who listened to me on radio in Chicago in the 70s, in the Bay Area since I got here in 1976. And so if you did used to listen to me on a radio station somewhere, would you be kind enough to drop me an email, peter@peterbcollins.com, and reference that station? The list is WDAI in Chicago, KOME in San Jose, KRQR, KNBR and KSFO and KGO AM talk stations here in San Francisco. I also was on Syria satellite radio and had a syndicated program from 2005 to 2009 that was on about a dozen stations, mostly on the West Coast. So if you happen to have found me because of one of those radio gigs, let me know. I'd be tickled to find out. You know, Al Franken published a book back in 2003. It led to his hiring at Air America. That led to his running for the Senate from Minnesota, and he's now in his, second term there. And Al Franken published a book called Lies, and the Lying Liars Who Tell Them. And it came to mind as I read this news analysis in the New York Times today, and yes, I've linked to it in the show file for the podcast, that chews on the issue of when Trump tells something that isn't true, how should the corporate media treat it? And one of the issues is the dictionary definition of a liar. And a liar is somebody who tells a falsehood with the intention to deceive. So the term lie or liar is strong because it assumes that the person who applies it knows that the other person intentionally deceived. And that is a tricky standard when you're talking about a slippery politician, whether it's Trump or anybody else. And so on the issue of the claims of voter fraud by Trump, the New York Times writer Dan Barry here says, as far as anyone knows, the president's assertion is akin to saying that millions of unicorns also voted illegally. And they quote Jeffrey Nunberg, a linguist from here in the Bay Area, who wrote the book about assholes. And we had a lovely interview with him a couple of years ago. You can find it in the search window at peterbcollins.com. Just enter the name Nunberg, and you'll find it. Anyway, he said that the synonyms are baseless, bogus, lies, untruths, and that, there is some caution that needs to be used. And he said that to say that someone has lied, an active verb, or told a lie, a more passive distancing noun, is to say that the person intended to deceive. In addition, Nunberg said a certain moral opprobrium attaches to it, a reprehensibility of motive. And NPR is struggling with whether lies or lies, and they quote a senior president for news, Michael Oreskes, saying that the minute you start branding things with word like lie, you push people away from you. Well, maybe you push funders and government watchdogs away from you, Mr. NPR. Speaking of reporters and journalists, there are still at least 6 who covered the confrontations during the Trump inaugural and are facing felony rioting charges. These are certified, credentialed journalists who were there covering the events. And to see these charges still in place almost a week later is really troubling. And the news organizations and organizations that support journalists and freedom of reporting, they are outraged. But still, the police department there, the Metro Police Department, refuses to comment. And Jeffrey Light, a lawyer in Washington who has notably been the counsel for many of Jason Leopold's Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, Jeffrey Light is now representing those 6 journalists and 45 other people who were arrested improperly, he says, on Inauguration Day. Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader from here in San Francisco, told the local paper, The Chronicle, that she's had 2 encounters with Donald Trump and she finds him insecure. So insecure, she said. For a person who's newly elected president to be so insecure as to declare he's now the president, ensconced in the White House, and saying, I won the popular vote and 3 to 5 million Americans voted illegally in our country, to suggest and undermine the integrity of our voting system is really strange. I frankly feel very sad about the president making this claim. I felt sorry for him. I even prayed for him, but then I prayed for the United States of America. She said dealing with Bush, we had a standard where you agree to a set of facts or some numbers or a baseline, and then you go from there. But now, she said, you're dealing from a set of facts instead of being in a fact-free zone or whatever they want to call their version of reality. She said she met Trump once at the inauguration and then this past Monday night at the White House meeting. And she said after Trump rambled about the so-called voter fraud, she said she confronted him over his claim and said it was false. And she also confronted him about killing Obamacare. Trump gave that interview to ABC, and there are a couple of items I just want to comment on. One of the dangerous things he repeated is that we should have taken the oil from Iraq. And he says that that would have stopped the Islamic State. I mean, that is not rational or legitimate in any way. And it's very dangerous to link American military operations to imperialism around energy supplies because, well, it feeds the notion that we're on a self-serving crusade. And that's probably true. But for him to go public in this way, it's kind of like the loose lips use of the word torture. He really seems to feel that he can say anything and it just doesn't matter. He offered double talk on Obamacare replacement with a sales job again that it's going to be great, it's going to be cheap, you're going to everybody. It's incredible that they're planning to repeal without a replacement identified and no path to get it through the Congress. On his immigration plans, he said that it's not a Muslim ban that he is suggesting, just a ban on countries with terrorism. But he leaves out Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and it is obviously a Muslim ban. He continues to talk about crowd size, and the real howler was when he said that his speech last Saturday at the CIA was a home run. He got a standing ovation bigger than the one Peyton Manning got when he won the Super Bowl. What? What the hell are you talking about? Also, a friend on Facebook, Norman Davis, posted an item that I think originated at the Washington Post, but I was unable to find it on their website. It is a Pravda-style report on the inauguration. And it reads like this. Here's the fair and unbiased story about the inauguration written in compliance with the Trump-style guidelines that we should have been obeying all along. Nothing that has ever happened or will ever happen again was as great as Donald Trump's inauguration. The crowd was magnificent and huge, bigger than any crowd had ever been before. It stretched all the way to the moon. The Pope, who was there, confirmed it. Thanks for being here, Pope, Trump told him. Are you kidding? You're my best friend. I wouldn't miss your big day for anything. He gave Trump a high five. Everyone in the world had come there at great expense. They all sold all their possessions, their homes, their Hamilton tickets, to raise money to come and see this great sight. So it's a hoot. And it's a much-needed bromide in these dark days, the early dark days of the Trump administration. A couple of more items here before I go. Here on the West Coast, we've got this utility that I have declared to be a rogue utility, the Pacific Gas and Election Company, country. Yeah, it is company, sorry. They act like it's a country. And PG&E has been found guilty of criminal charges, criminal negligence, in the wake of a gas pipeline explosion in the community of San Bruno going back a few years. A handful of people were killed, 35 homes were destroyed, and Judge Thelton Henderson, who is on his way to retirement from the bench, is cleaning up his docket, and he is thinking of forcing PG&E in all future advertising where they greenwash about their safety programs, that they have to disclose that they were convicted on a criminal basis of negligence in the past. I think it's advisable, but the company thinks it's too much and retribution. And finally today, I have a nephew, Aaron, who has very serious nut allergies. And whenever I'm around him, I make sure I put my peanut butter away and we don't expose him to anything. Well, I'm just learning from an article in today's New York Times that the airlines have really gotten tough and brutal on people who come on board and say, I've got a nut allergy. Now, we know that airlines like to serve nuts. I think that's all you can get on Southwest. But American Airlines, which doesn't even serve peanuts or any other nuts on its flights, kicked a family off a plane flight recently because the father said, hey, my kid's got nut allergies, and can we get on the plane and kind of clean up the seat where he's going to sit to make sure nobody dropped any nuts? So the airline responded by asking all of them, in fact, ordering them, to leave the plane. We were off the plane in 2 minutes, said the father, Dr. Bloom. And they're not alone. There are many incidents where allergic people who declare their allergies are kicked off flights, even though fewer than 4% of all in-flight medical emergencies are caused by any kind of allergic reaction. So this is the first I've heard of this. It is outrageous, and I think that the people who are allergic to nuts need to declare that this is a nutty policy that cannot stand. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. Check us out, Facebook Live, Friday, 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.